Hello and welcome to this final edition of our Become Inspired Wellbeing Bootcamp. Today we're going to be talking about unhelpful thoughts and how we can try and stop those. But also we're going to just have a bit of a recap now on what we've covered so far. So far we've tried to cover for teachers, trying to engage back in with your purpose, why you got into teaching, so finding your why. We then tried to look at values and how we can build goals around those values, around your purpose. And we've also looked a little bit on resilience. Teachers are obviously struggling right now with the amount of remote learning they're having to do. They're at the rough end of the stick, in my opinion. So we're here to try and help support you. We've got our two different types of platform. We've got the platform for the kids, for secondary schools and junior schools, but we've also got a platform for teachers. And this is for schools to subscribe to and pay for so they can look after their teachers' wellbeing. We also have the option where if schools can't do that, teachers can subscribe to our Teacher Wellbeing Hub, which can be found on our Become Inspired webpage on www.becomeinspired.co.uk. So have a look at that later on. But for today, this session, we're going to be really focusing on how you can try and unhook yourself from unhelpful and limiting thoughts. So it's quite common for us humans to try and look for problems and start ruminating about them. And that is quite normal. So what we want to try and look at today is how potentially we can get unhooked from there and stop them limiting us getting towards our values and goals. And what we're going to use here is something called the choice point. So what we're going to be talking about today is the choice point. Now, the choice point is a way of looking at your life and how you can move towards your values and goals to give you that fulfilled and meaningful life that we're all after. It's not going to give you forever happiness. That is not actually out there. Whoever's told you that happiness can be continuous is telling you a lie. Life is, for us, is actually about giving people the skills to live a fulfilled and meaningful life. So when we're looking at that, we're looking at how we can actually learn to cope with all the things that life brings us. So that's the hardships and the good times, and understanding that and having that psychological flexibility that we can cope with everything is actually going to enable you to be able to live that fulfilled and meaningful life. So as humans, we are always doing something. We could be looking at a computer screen, we could be reading a book, we could be asleep, we could be walking. We're always doing something. And if we're always doing something, we always have choices. So we have choices of what we can do. And what affects our choices tends to be how we are thinking and how we're feeling. So it's about what's going on in our brains, what we're feeling, the things around us. So there's lots of things going on. But there's one thing that can help us, lead us towards the behavior and the life that we want. So these are called towards moves. So all the things, while things are going fantastically well, let's say a couple of years ago before the pandemic, as a teacher, you could be thinking, I'm really enjoying teaching. This is great. I'm enjoying the school holidays. I'm enjoying the career that I've got. I'm enjoying inspiring kids. This is a great thing. So while that's happening, the situation around you, the thoughts and feelings are probably all positive. So you're making lots of towards moves, which is towards your values and goals. So that's all brilliant. And we have lots of moments in life where that happens, and hopefully they will return for many of us as the pandemic hopefully peters out. But for the time being, there are lots of unhelpful thoughts going on. So there are thoughts of us, maybe, what's going to happen in the future? Do I really enjoy this? Am I going to be remote learning? Why am I doing this? These type of thoughts, I'm not good enough. This may bring anxiety. And this leads to us being hooked by these thoughts, which then makes us create away moves. Now, away moves can be anything, but it's just moves that aren't leading you to your values and goals. It might be leading you to do certain things, drink more. I know certainly I have drunk more during the pandemic just because it's a release mechanism. It may be not speaking nicely to your spouse or your kids, or losing your temper, or becoming anxious. All these things are very normal. So how do we unhook from these negative, or let's say unhelpful thoughts, and get us back moving towards moves? So what can we do? So what we're looking at here is actions. We need little helpers to try and unhook us from these thoughts and move us towards our goals and our values. So what can these actions be? What can we use to motivate us, to get us away from these unhelpful thoughts and move us towards our goals? Now, the first thing to really state here is that all thoughts in our brain has evolved is to look for problems and try and solve them. So our brains naturally are going to be coming up with things which may seem negative to you, but it's just doing its job. Your brain is completely normal. You're not going mad. This is exactly what your brain has evolved to do for millions of years. Back in the Stone Ages, if you didn't run from a tiger, or you didn't keep an eye out for tigers or anything like that, you might potentially die. Or if you weren't continually worried about, am I going to have enough food? Am I going to have enough water? Then potentially you could starve or die. But however, now that doesn't happen. So we have evolved, our brains are built to think of these things. So the first thing to do is just to notice that unhelpful thought. And I think some of us may think, actually, well, I do that already. But actually, I've started doing this actually more recently, is noticing and beginning to notice my thoughts and actually be aware of my feelings. Where is that anxiety lying? Is it in your tummy? And just by noticing it is the first stage to be able to actually diffuse and unhook from it. The second stage is really acceptance. So it's accepting that the thought is there. We're not trying to push it away. We're not trying to fight it, but we're just accepting that thought is there. And it's there, and it's actually doing me it's there for a reason, and by not fighting it and just accepting it is a really positive way to unhook from those thoughts. So we've got to notice it and then learn to accept it. Now, it's a difficult process to accept some thoughts. Some thoughts might seem really real in your head, and they may seem like something that you've got to act upon. But by accepting that maybe and challenging that thought is beneficial to you, then that's the first stage. And it's almost like some of the videos by Russ Harris you can actually go and look at online. If you just type in Russ Harris ACT, there's some really good videos out there and analogies of it being like a negative radio station or a radio station playing in your mind continually, and it's radio doom and gloom, and you've got to learn just to tune out of it. So you're never going to get rid of it, and the more you try and get rid of it, almost the louder that radio is going to get. So it's learning how to accept that radio station is going to be playing, but you don't always have to listen to it. And I think that's the key point. So noticing it, accept that that's quite normal to have these unhelpful thoughts. And if you're really struggling with this, get separating and diffusing away from these thoughts to stop them getting on top of everything. What we can do is we can actually start doing some things to diffuse those thoughts. And these are scientifically proven. Some of them may sound a little bit silly in what I'm saying, but actually they've been proven to work. So the first one is say the thought out loud in a funny voice. So by adding some humor to the actual thought can actually diffuse it and make it seem less powerful. So just by saying it out loud and saying it in a funny voice can work. So give it a go. Second one is say it really quickly and repeat it 20 times. And the third one is sing the thought to a song like Happy Birthday. Now, again, this may sound really silly, but what we're doing is we're diffusing that thought and we're giving it less power. At the moment, and I see it a lot with anxiety, is that if you have anxious thoughts, the anxiety has the power over you. What we're trying to do is we're trying to break it up and sort of dissolve it so it doesn't have so much power. And by adding some humor and some fun to that thought can actually diffuse that thought. And the final one is saying it really slowly. So the idea is we say it as slowly as we possibly can. So there's some simple techniques to try and help you diffuse from your those thoughts. And another analogy that I often use is imagine your thoughts are like wild horses running around your brain. Now, if you go to a wild horse and try and chase it away, you'll find that they'll get angry and they might become more powerful and they might almost try and attack you. Whereas if you just let the wild horses be there, then potentially they're gonna be there, but they're not going to bother you. And I think that's the way that you have to try and approach your thoughts if they're unhelpful. If you have helpful thoughts that, you know, I'm good at this, and I can, you know, positive thoughts, or you think the thoughts are helpful, then that's great. We can act upon those. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope that's been insightful for you. As I said to you before, all this type of content is on our Wellbeing app that we have called youHQ for Teachers. You can subscribe to that personally through our becomeinspired.co.uk website. Go on the educators page. But ideally, it's the school that we think that maybe should be supporting you, so they can subscribe to it. It's not a lot of money. You can find out more information on our website, lifeontime.co.uk. Speak to you soon.